The Galactic Accord Council chambers erupted in chaos. When the human vessel arrived, every representative had expected retaliation. They had expected threats and demands and possibly declarations of war. They had not expected the doors to open and reveal a man they had declared dead. Ambassador Seong Minjung walked into the chamber with the scars of orbital bombardment still visible on his face. Had survived the destruction of the diplomatic station by pure luck. A maintenance hatch had blown open and ejected him into space, where a rescue pod had eventually found him. Had spent 6 weeks recovering in a hidden medical facility while his species fought for survival. He stood before the same council that had authorized his murder. Honored representatives of the Galactic Accord, I bring greetings from the people of Earth. The chamber fell silent. Counselor Vanilla watched the human ambassador with something approaching awe. He'd seen species broken by far less than what humanity had endured, but this man stood before his will be murderers with dignity and calm. You authorized an attack on my planet that killed over 800 million of my people. Ambassador Seong continued. You destroyed our cities and murdered our children and left our world in ashes. And now you sit here debating what to do about us, as if we were a problem to be solved. He paused and let the silence stretch. We are not a problem. We are a species that has survived extinction events that would have ended any of your civilizations. We are a species that builds cities from rubble and hope. We are a species that does not forget. And we are a species that is very, very patient. The Crethany representative tried to speak, but Ambassador Seong raised his hand. I have not finished. Your Admiral Torvex is in our custody. He will stand trial for crimes against humanity, and he will face justice according to our laws. Not yours. The Crethany Dominion will pay reparations to the families of every civilian killed in your attack. And you will surrender all military vessels that participated in the bombardment. This is outrageous. The Crethany representative snarled. You cannot make demands of the Accord. Ambassador Seong smiled. I am not making demands of the Accord. I am informing you of what will happen. If the Crethany refuse these terms, our fleet will escort them to the edge of their territory and ensure they understand the consequences of refusal. You would commit genocide. No, we will not commit genocide. That is the difference between us. You tried to exterminate my species because you feared what we might become. We could do the same to you, but we choose not to. That choice is our answer to your attack. Vanilla found herself nodding. This was exactly what she had hoped to see. Humans were not monsters seeking revenge. They were a species that understood the difference between justice and vengeance. Ambassador Seong turned to address the entire chamber. The Galactic Accord authorized our destruction because you believed we were dangerous. You were right. We are dangerous, but not in the way you feared. He stepped forward and his voice grew stronger. We are dangerous because we refuse to be victims. We are dangerous because we fight for each other with everything we have. We are dangerous because we will never stop protecting those we love. And we are dangerous because we offer something the Accord never has. What do you offer? Vanilla asked. Ambassador Seong looked at her, and his expression softened. We offer a choice. Humanity will not seek membership in the Galactic Accord. Instead, we are establishing a new coalition. Any species that rejects the Accord's methods is welcome to join us. Any species that believes in cooperation rather than domination may find a place at our table. The chamber exploded into shouting. As representatives argued with each other, some demanded humanity be destroyed immediately. Others expressed interest in this new coalition. The Accord that had stood united for millennia was fracturing before Vanilla's eyes. She approached Ambassador Seong during the chaos. Why mercy? She asked quietly. After what was done to your people, why offer peace instead of destruction? Ambassador Seong looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. Counselor, I lost my wife and daughter in the bombardment. I have every reason to want the Crethani exterminated. But my grandmother taught me something when I was young. She said that revenge is a fire that consumes everything, including the one who lights it. He glanced at the arguing representatives. If we destroy the Crethani, we become what they feared. We prove that they were right to try to exterminate us. But if we offer justice instead of revenge, we prove that humanity can be trusted. We break the cycle of violence that has driven the Accord for millennia. Vanilla felt something she had not experienced in centuries. Hope that the Sari will join your coalition. She said. Ambassador Siang nodded. Thank you, Counselor. Together, perhaps we can build something better than what came before. Admiral Torvek sat in a human detention facility and watched the news broadcasts from across the galaxy. Species were leaving the Galactic Accord in unprecedented numbers. The Dasari and the Morvathi and the Valdrani had already announced their intention to join the human coalition. Others were debating the decision. The Crethani Dominion had agreed to the human terms, rather than face continued conflict. Their fleet was being dismantled, and their leaders were facing trial. Torvex himself would face judgment soon. A human guard entered his cell, and he expected hostility. Instead, the guards simply brought him food and left. Without a word, no threats, and no violence, and no revenge. Just quiet professional. Lizard did not understand. He had tried to destroy their species, and they treated him with dignity. It made no sense, but perhaps that was the point. On Earth, the survivors emerged from their bunkers and began rebuilding. Commander Yun stood on a hillside overlooking what had once been a great city and watched construction crews clearing rubble. Children played among the ruins, chasing each other and laughing as if the war had never happened. That was the thing about humans that other species never understood. They did not just survive, they healed, and they rebuilt, and they found joy even in the darkest times. Beak approached and stood beside her. Commander, the memorial station is complete. The Accord has agreed to allow it to remain in neutral space as a permanent reminder of what happened here. You nodded. 800 million names. That is a lot of lives to remember. The engineers say they designed it to last for 10,000 years. Yun looked up at the sky where ships moved among the stars. Somewhere out there a new coalition was forming. Somewhere out there species were choosing hope over fear. Somewhere out there the galaxy was learning what humanity was really made of. Dr. Beak, what do you think Ambassador Siang's grandmother would say if she could see us now? Beak smiled. I think she would say that the best revenge is building something beautiful from the ashes. Yun felt the weight of the past 6 weeks finally begin to lift from her shoulders. They had lost so much, but they had also proven something to the entire galaxy. Humanity could not be broken, not by bombardment and not by occupation and not by attempted genocide. They were the children of Earth, and they would always find a way. As the sun set over the rebuilding city, Yu made a silent promise to the 800 million who had died. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten, and the coalition they had died to create would endure for as long as humans walked among the stars. The galaxy had sent death to Earth, and Earth had replied with something far more powerful: hope. That was humanity's true answer, not destruction and not revenge and not fear. Just a simple, stubborn refusal to stop believing that tomorrow could be better than today. And that was why humanity would endure long after the Galactic Accord crumbled and the Crethani Dominion faded into history. Long after the stars themselves grew cold, humanity would still be there, building and healing and hoping, because that was what humans did. That was what humans had always done, and that was what humans would always do forever. The first sign that something had changed came when debris near the Crethani fleet began to move. Admiral Torvex was in his quarters when the alarm sounded. Rushed to the command deck and found his officers staring at their displays in confusion. Admiral, the wreckage from our bombardment is activating. Weapons platforms are powering up throughout the debris field. Torvex felt ice spread through his veins. That is impossible. We destroyed all their orbital defenses in the first hour. These platforms were already among the debris before we arrived. Admiral, they were disguised as destroyed wreckage. We never detected them. The first plasma bolts struck the Crethony fleet before Torvex could give orders. 3 escort vessels exploded in the opening seconds. More followed as weapons fire came from every direction. The humans had turned the very debris of their dead stations into a trap, and now that trap was closing. Commander Yun watched the battle unfold from her command center deep underground. The orbital weapons platforms were performing exactly as designed, but they were only the first wave. Dr. Beak, activate the lunar assets. Activating now. Commander, on the dark side of Earth's moon, hidden doors opened in the ancient rock ships. Emerged that the Crethony had never detected 50 human vessels built in secret over 3 decades. They were smaller than Crethony warships, and they carried fewer weapons, but they had one advantage that no other fleet in the galaxy possessed. Human Cruise Captain Han Seokwan sat in the command chair of the flagship Indomitable and felt the acceleration press him into his seat. The ship was pulling 12 times standard gravity as it curved around the moon toward the Crethony fleet. Any Crethony crew would have been crushed into paste by these forces, but human bodies were different. Humans had evolved on a heavy gravity world with a thick atmosphere and constant threats from predators and disease in each other. Their bones were dense and their muscles were strong, and their cardiovascular systems could handle stress that would kill most species. Captain Han's crew was uncomfortable, but very much alive. All ships report ready for combat. Captain Han looked at the display showing the Crethony fleet in disarray. The orbital weapons had already destroyed or damaged nearly 50 enemy vessels. Now it was time for the Indomitable and her sisters to finish what the platforms had started. All ships engage at will. Priority targets are their command vessels and communication ships. We blind them first. The human fleet struck the Crethony like a blade from the darkness. Admiral Torvex watched his command structure collapse in real time. The human ships moved in ways that should not have been possible. They executed turns that would pulverize any crew, and then emerged firing. They dove through debris fields at speeds that guaranteed collision and somehow threaded through without impact. They fought without regard their own safety, using tactics that Crethony officers had never encountered, because no other species fought the way humans did. No other species was willing to suffer so much to ensure victory. Admiral, we have lost contact with the 3rd and 5th battle groups. Admiral, the humans are targeting our communication relays. Admiral, our jump drives are being jammed by something in the debris field. Torvex slammed his appendages against his command console. All ships focus fire on their flagship. Destroy it and the rest will fall. But even as he gave the order, he saw the human flagship dance away from concentrated fire. It took hits that should have crippled it and kept fighting, and when a Crethony cruiser moved to cut off its escape, the human ship did something insane. It accelerated directly toward the cruiser. The 2 vessels collided at an angle that tore both ships apart, but escape pods launched from the human ship moments before impact. The humans had sacrificed their vessel to destroy a ship twice its size, and now other human ships were doing the same thing. They were trading their lives for Crethony deaths at a rate that made no tactical sense, except to humans. Commander Yun received the report of the Indomitable's destruction and felt grief pierce through her focus. Captain Han had been her friend for 20 years, but his sacrifice had taken out the Crethony cruiser, Devastator and its complement of 3,000 soldiers, and the battle was far from over. All ground forces. This is Commander Yun. Execute uprising protocols now, across the planet. Earth-resistant cells that had waited 6 weeks for this moment finally emerged. Sergeant Major Choi led his soldiers up from the tunnels beneath. So they emerged into the ruins of a city they had once called home. Crethany soldiers turned to face this new threat, only to find themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Resistance fighters knew every collapsed building and every hidden passage and every shadow. Crethany knew nothing. The fighting was brutal and close, and personal humans died by the thousands. But Crethany died by the tens of thousands within 18 hours every. Crethany installation on Earth had been neutralized. The occupation was over, Admiral. Torvex stared at the display showing his losses and felt his world crumbling. 217 vessels destroyed or disabled. 60,000 soldiers dead in orbit. 40,000 more dead on the planet's surface. His fleet was crippled, and his occupation force was eliminated, and the human ships were not pursuing. They held position between his remaining vessels and the planet, daring him to continue the fighter. Vex understood that he had two choices. He could throw his remaining ships at the human fleet and die trying to complete his mission, or he could retreat and face disgrace before the Galactic Accord. His tactical officer interrupted his thoughts. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Commander Yun appeared on the display behind. There stood rows of human soldiers covered in dust and blood, but standing tall. Admiral Torvex, your occupation has failed. Your fleet is crippled. Your soldiers are dead or captured. You may retreat now, and we will not pursue. Or you may continue fighting, and we will destroy every ship you have left. Torvex's mandibles clicked in fury. You cannot win. Human, even if you destroy my fleet, the Accord will send another. They will never stop until your species is extinct. Yoon smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, do you know why we did not pursue your retreating vessels? It is not mercy. It is a message. We are letting survivors escape so they can tell the rest of the galaxy what happens when you attack Earth. She leaned closer to the camera. We could have used Project Pandora. Admiral, we could have released weapons that would have made your home worlds uninhabitable for 10,000 years. We chose not to. That is also a message. We will not become what attacked us, but we will never forget, and we will never be defenseless. Again, Torvex felt something he had never experienced before: true terror. What do you want? I want you to surrender yourself to human custody. I want you to stand trial for the murder of 800 million civilians. And I want you to tell the Galactic Accord that humanity is awake now. Torvex looked at his remaining officers and saw no fight left in them. The occupation had been supposed to be easy: kill the primitives and take their resources and move on. Instead, they had awakened something that could not be killed. He gave the order that ended his career and possibly his species' dominance. All ships, power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. Inform the Accord that we are surrendering to the humans. Commander Yun watched the Crethany fleet go dark and allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she thought of the 800 million dead, and the moment passed. There was still work to be done. She opened a channel to the resistance cells around the world. This is Commander Yun. The battle is over, but the war is just beginning. Tend to our wounded and bury our dead and prepare for what comes next. Commander, what does come next? Yoon looked at the display showing the captured Crethany fleet and the ruined planet below. Next, we show the galaxy what humanity is really made of. The Galactic Accord Council chambers fell silent when the transmission from Earth arrived. Every representative from every species watched as a human woman appeared on the central display. Her face was scarred, and her uniform was stained with dust. But her eyes burned with something that made several delegates look away. To the Crethany Dominion and the Galactic Accord, Commander Yun said, "We received your message. Here is our reply." The transmission ended. Fleet Admiral Torvex stood on his command deck and stared at the blank screen. For the first time since the attack began, he felt something unfamiliar in his chest. It took him several moments to recognize it as fear. How is this possible? He demanded. We destroyed their communications infrastructure. His tactical officer checked the sensor data with trembling appendages. The transmission originated from multiple points across the planet's surface, Admiral. They appeared to have hidden communication systems that survived the bombardment. Torvex felt his mandibles clicking together in agitation. Find those transmission points and destroy them immediately. But even as he gave the order, he knew it would not be enough. The humans had hidden for 6 weeks. They had rebuilt their communications without detection, and now they were announcing their survival to the entire galaxy. What else had they hidden? Counselor Vanala watched the other Accord representatives react to the human transmission. Some expressed outrage that the primitives dared to broadcast. Others demanded immediate reinforcement of the Crethany fleet, but a few representatives sat in thoughtful silence. Vanilla noticed that the Morvathi ambassador was whispering to his aides with obvious agitation. She approached him during the recess that followed. Ambassador Kethran, you seem troubled. The Morvathi's massive form shifted uncomfortably. Counselor Vanilla, I must share something with you, but you must promise not to reveal my involvement. Vanilla Nadakethram leaned close enough that only she could hear. 40 years ago, a human vessel crashed on a colony world. We expected the crew to die within hours. Our atmosphere is poisonous to most oxygen breathers, and the temperature kills unprotected flesh in minutes. But they survived. Vanilla guessed. They survived for 3 months, Counselor. 3 months in an environment that should have killed them in hours. They built shelters from wreckage and filtered our atmosphere through improvised devices and ate local vegetation that we did not even know was edible. Catherine's voice dropped even lower. When we finally reached them, they were thin and injured, but alive. And do you know what disturbed me most? They were singing. They were dying slowly in an alien hellscape, and they sang songs to keep their spirits high. Vanilla felt the cold uncertainty in her heart grow stronger. What happened to them? We returned them to their people. But I never forgot the look in their eyes. They had no right to survive, and yet they did, because they simply refused to accept that survival was impossible. The council reconvened, and debate continued about how to handle the human situation. Some representatives argued that the Crethany should simply increase bombardment until nothing remained alive. Others suggested negotiations might now be necessary. But one by one, other species began sharing their own encounters with humanity. To the sorry. Remembered a trade dispute 2 centuries ago when human merchants had waited 17 years to complete a deal rather than accept unfavorable terms. The Valdrani recalled a human exploration team that had crossed 300 kilometers of frozen wasteland after their vehicles failed rather than call for rescue and admit defeat. The Nethasi spoke of a human scientist who had worked for 40 years on a single problem that her own species had declared impossible to solve. She had solved it. The day before she died of old age, each story painted the same picture. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but they possessed something that no other species had in the same measure. They simply refused to give up. Fleet Admiral Torvex watched his occupation collapse in real time. Human transmission had changed everything. Before, there had been scattered attacks by desperate survivors. Now they were coordinated assaults across every occupied zone. Crethanus soldiers died in ambush that seemed to come from nowhere. Supply convoys vanished without trace. Communication stations were destroyed within hours of being established, and the message carved into walls had changed. It no longer said, "We remember." Now it said, "We are coming." Torvex demanded reinforcements from the Galactic Accord, but the response was delayed. Some member species were reconsidering their support for the neutralization. Others were openly questioning whether the Crethany had made a catastrophic error. Torvex found himself alone above a planet that refused to die. Commander Yun received reports from resistance cells around the world. The timing was almost perfect. Sergeant Major Choi's forces had secured the underground networks across Asia. Similar Operations had succeeded in Europe and Africa, and the Americas. Billions of humans waited in bunkers for the signal to emerge. And, in orbit, the Crethony fleet was stretched thin, trying to maintain control of a planet that fought back from every shadow. Yun opened a channel to the facility beneath the Pacific. Dr. Beak. What is the status of Prometheus? All systems are ready, Commander. Orbital platforms are prepared to activate on your command. Hidden ships in the asteroid belt are moving into position. Ground-based weapons are armed and targeting solutions are locked. Yoon felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Once she gave the order, there would be no going back. Millions more would die on both sides, but the alternative was extinction. Dr. Beak. I need to know something before we proceed. Yes, Commander. The Crethony have 400 warships in orbit. We have fewer than 50 hidden vessels. Can we actually win this fight? There was a pause before Dr. Beak answered. Commander, our ships are not designed to win a fair fight. They are designed to fight from the position of weakness. They are faster and more maneuverable because human pilots can survive forces that would kill Crethony crews. Our weapons are built for ambush and hit-and-run tactics. We cannot destroy their entire fleet, but we can hurt them badly enough that they will never forget what humanity is capable of. You nodded, even though Dr. Beak could not see her. That will have to be enough. Begin final countdown. We launch in 12 hours. Counselor Vanala left the council chambers and returned to her quarters. She had spent the entire session listening to representatives argue about what to do with humanity. None of them understood what was actually happening. The humans were not simply surviving. They were preparing. Something. Vanilla accessed her private database and searched for everything she could find about human military history. What she found kept her awake for the entire night. Humans had fought wars lasting decades. They had rebuilt nations from complete destruction multiple times. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire species, and then chosen not to use them. But most disturbing was a pattern she noticed in their conflicts. When humans felt they had been wronged, they did not simply fight to win. They fought to ensure that their enemy would never threaten them again. The Crethony had not just attacked humanity. They had tried to exterminate them, and if human history was any guide, the response would be proportional. Began drafting a private message to the Dasari homeworld. Someone needed to prepare for what was coming, because whatever happened next would change the galaxy forever. Above Earth, the Crethony fleet maintained its position. Admiral Torvex slept poorly. In his quarters, he dreamed of human eyes staring at him from the darkness. He dreamed of the message carved into walls across a burning planet. We are coming. When he woke, he told himself it was just a dream. He should have paid more attention, because beneath the ruins and the ashes and the ocean floor, humanity was stirring, and in 12 hours the galaxy would learn what happened when you attacked the children of Earth. Fleet Admiral Torvex stood before the observation window of his command vessel and watched the blue planet rotate slowly in the darkness of space. He had waited 3 decades for this moment. The Galactic Accord had finally granted authorization for what they called a preemptive neutralization strike against the species known as humans. Torvex clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction as his fleet of 400 warships moved into position around the third planet from the yellow sun. Intelligence reports had described humans as a fractured and primitive species that spent most of their existence fighting among themselves. They possessed no unified government and no meaningful space presence beyond a few fragile stations orbiting their world. The strike would be swift, and the victory would be absolute. Commander Yun Jihei sat in Earth's Unified Defense Command Center, located deep beneath the mountains of what humans called Korea. She reviewed the morning reports while drinking her second cup of tea and thinking about the diplomatic summit happening in orbit. Ambassador Seong Minjun and 3,000 other diplomats were meeting with representatives from 12 different species aboard the Galactic Accords station. It was supposed to be a historic moment for humanity. The first alarm sounded at exactly 9 in the morning. set down her tea, and watched as red warnings flooded her display screens. Enemy vessels had appeared from nowhere, and they were already firing. The orbital defense platforms went dark one after another as plasma fire rained down from the Crethany fleet. Hands moved across the controls as she tried to establish contact with the diplomatic station. There was only silence. Station was gone. 3,000 human diplomats, including Ambassador Xiang, had been killed in the opening seconds of the attack. Yun felt something cold settle into her chest, but she did not allow herself to grieve. There would be time for grief later. If any of them survived, the bombardment began targeting major population centers across 6 continents simultaneously: Shanghai and Mumbai and Cairo and New York and London and Snow. Each city disappeared beneath columns of fire that could be seen from space. Millions of human lives ended in the first horde. Vex watched the destruction from his command deck and felt nothing but satisfaction. This was exactly how the previous neutralizations had proceeded. First came the shock and chaos, then came the desperate counterattacks that his fleet would easily destroy. Finally came the silence of a species that no longer existed. His tactical officer approached with a status report. "Admiral, we have eliminated their primary military installations and major population centers." "Excellent," Torvex replied. "What of their counterattack forces?" The tactical officer paused. "There have been no counterattacks, Admiral." Torvex turned to face his subordinate. "None at all. The remaining military forces appear to have gone completely dark. Admiral, we are detecting no communications and no movement and no energy signatures." Torvex considered this information. Perhaps the humans had simply collapsed faster than expected. Their fractured societies had probably turned on each other in the chaos rather than uniting against the external threat. It was pathetic but not unexpected from such a primitive species. "Continue the bombardment," Torvex ordered. "Destroy everything that remains standing deep beneath the burning surface of Earth." Commander Yun made a decision that would determine the fate of her species. Every instinct told her to launch an immediate counterattack. They still had hidden assets that the enemy did not know about: ships concealed in asteroid fields and weapons, platforms disguised as debris, and submarines carrying missiles that could reach orbit. But Yun understood something that the Crethany did not. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this exact scenario. They had anticipated that a hostile species might attempt to destroy them. Before they could spread beyond their home system, they had built bunkers and underground cities and secret installations. Across the globe, they had created decentralized communication networks that could not be destroyed by orbital bombardment, and most importantly, they had learned patience. Yun opened a channel to the surviving military commanders around the world. "This is Commander Yun of Unified Defense Command. I am ordering all units to execute Protocol Silence. Repeat, execute Protocol Silence immediately. Across the planet." Surviving military forces received the order and obeyed. Weapons. When cold communications went dark, soldiers disappeared into tunnels and bunkers that the enemy sensors could not detect. To the Crethany watching from orbit, it appeared as though humanity had simply stopped existing. Torvex received a final report from his tactical officer 6 hours after the attack began. "Admiral, we are detecting no remaining military activity on the planet's surface. Their power grids have collapsed, and their communications networks are on. I believe the neutralization is complete." Torvex allowed himself a rare moment of open pleasure. "Excellent work. Prepare a victory report for the Galactic Accord. Humanity has been pacified." He looked out at the burning planet below and saw only conquest. He did not see the millions of humans sheltering in bunkers beneath the destruction. He did not see Commander Yun coordinating with resistance cells through fiber optic cables. Buried deep underground, he did not see the hidden ships powering down to avoid detection. He did not see the weapons platforms playing dead among the orbital debris. He saw what he expected to see, and that would be his greatest mistake. The Galactic Accord received Torvex's victory report 12 hours after the attack began. The assembled representatives congratulated themselves on preventing the spread of a dangerous species. They began discussing how to divide Earth's resources among themselves. Counselor Vanala of the Dasari Collective listened to the celebration and felt a cold uncertainty growing in her heart. She had read the intelligence reports on humans with great interest. One detail bothered her more than any other. Humans had survived 5 mass extinction events on their planet. They had endured ice ages and asteroid impacts and supervolcanic eruptions. Each time they had emerged stronger and more determined than before. Vila wondered if perhaps the Crethany had made a terrible error, but she kept her concerns to herself. The Accord did not tolerate descent underground. Commander Yun gathered reports from surviving commanders across the globe. Numbers were devastating. Over 800 million humans had died in the initial attack. Entire cities had been reduced to ash and glass, but 3 billion humans had reached the bunkers in time. The hidden infrastructure had worked exactly as designed. Yun looked at the data and felt the cold thing in her chest transform into something else, something hot and patient, and absolutely certain. She opened a secure channel to a facility hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean. Dr. Beak. This is Commander Yun. What is the status of Project Prometheus? Dr. Beak Yunji's voice came through clear and steady. All systems survived the attack. Commander, Prometheus is fully operational and awaiting activation. Yun closed her eyes for a moment and thought about the diplomatic station. She thought about Ambassador Xiong, who had believed so strongly in peace. She thought about the children who had died in the bombardment. Keep Prometheus in standby mode, she ordered. We will wait for the right moment. Understood, Commander. And Commander, what about Project Pandora? Yun felt the hot, patient thing in her chest burn a little brighter. Pandora remains sealed for now, but prepare it anyway. When we open that box, the galaxy will remember what happens when you attack humanity's children. Above the ruined planet, Torvex slept peacefully in his quarters, dreamed of the commendations he would receive and the political power he would gain, did not dream of what waited beneath the ashes. He should have. 3 weeks had passed since the bombardment, and the Crethany believed their victory was complete. Fleet Admiral Torvex had deployed ground forces to secure what he called resource extraction zones. Across the planet's surface, 12,000 Crethany soldiers marched through the ruins of human cities and saw nothing but ash and silence. They reported finding no survivors. They reported encountering no resistance. They were wrong, Sergeant. Major Choi Dong-yoon moved through a tunnel that connected the ruins of what had once been called Seoul to a bunker network extending 50 kilometers underground. He led a squad of 30 soldiers, carrying weapons and medical supplies and food for the civilians sheltering below. The tunnel was dark and narrow, and the air smelled like dust and recycled oxygen. Choi had walked this path 17 times since the attack began. Each journey brought more survivors into the underground network. Each journey revealed more information about the enemy occupation. Sergeant. Major? One of his soldiers whispered. Our scouts report a Crethani patrol 2 kilometers north of exit point 7. Choi nodded and checked his tactical display. Crethani were predictable creatures who followed patterns and schedules that humans had already memorized. We will exit through point 12 instead and circle around behind them. His soldiers moved without question. They had all lost family in the bombardment. They had all watched cities burn from the safety of the bunkers, and they had all sworn the same oath in the darkness. The Crethany would pay for what they had. Donades received his first troubling report 4 weeks after the attack. A patrol in the region humans called South America had failed to report, and search teams found their bodies arranged in a circle with their weapons missing and their communication equipment destroyed. There were no tracks and no evidence and no Witness Torvax ordered increased patrols and dismissed the incident as an isolated attack. By desperate survivors, the next day, 3 more patrols disappeared Dr. Beak. Yunji worked without rest in the facility, hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean Project. Prometheus surrounded her, in the form of thousands of display screens and control consoles, and automated systems that hummed with dormant power. She had spent 20 years building this network of hidden weapons and defense platforms. She had always hoped it would never be needed now. She prayed it would be enough. Her communication console chimed, and she accepted the incoming transmission from Commander Yun, Dr. Beak. I need a status report on all Prometheus assets. Beak pulled up the data and felt a grim satisfaction. The orbital platforms are holding position among the debris. The enemy believes they are destroyed wreckage. The hidden ships in the asteroid belt remain undetected. The ground-based weapons concealed beneath the ocean floor are fully operational. And Project Pandora, Beak hesitated before answering Project. Pandora was different from Prometheus. Prometheus was designed to defend. Pandora was designed to ensure that any species who attacked humanity would face consequences so severe that no one would ever try again. Pandora is ready, Commander, but I must advise caution. Once we open that door, there is no closing it. Commander Yun's voice remained steady. I understand, Doctor. For now we focus on Prometheus. Pandora remains our last resort. The Crethany occupation continued to unravel in ways that Torvax could not understand. His soldiers reported seeing humans in the ruins, only for those humans to vanish before they could be captured. Supplies went missing from secured warehouses, weapons disappeared from locked armories, and every morning his patrols found the same message carved into walls across every occupied zone. We remember. Torvax executed 3 of his officers for incompetence, but the problems only grew worse. His intelligence officers could not explain how humans were coordinating attacks across thousands of kilometers without any detectable communications. They could not explain where the survivors were hiding or how they were obtaining weapons. They could not explain why the human population counts did not match their projections according to the bombardment data. 90% of the human population should be dead, but the bodies they found numbered only in the hundreds of millions. Billions of humans were simply missing. Counselor Vanala sat in her quarters aboard the Galactic Accord Station and studied the reports from Earth with growing concern. She had lived for 300 years and had seen many species rise and fall. Something about the human situation felt deeply wrong. The Crethani had attempted preemptive neutralization on 3 species. Before humans, the Varathi had collapsed within days, and their survivors had been easily captured. The Malkari had fought back desperately and died fighting. The Zari ancestors had nearly faced the same fate before political changes in the Accord spared them. But humans were behaving differently. They had not collapsed, and they had not fought desperately. They had gone silent, and that silence frightened Vanilla more than any weapon. She accessed classified Accord records that she was not supposed to read. What she found made her blood run cold. The Crethany had not just attacked humans to prevent expansion. They had attacked because humanity frightened them. Human soldiers could fight for days without sleep. Human bodies could heal from wounds that would kill most species. Human minds could endure psychological trauma that would destroy other intelligent beings. And humans had a concept that did not translate well into other languages. They called it spite. It meant the willingness to suffer personally in order to ensure that your enemy suffered more. Crethany had recognized this trait and decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. They had been afraid of what humans might become of Vanilla, closed the files, and wondered if the Crethany had understood what they were really awakening. Sergeant Major Choi led his soldiers through another night of operations. They had rescued 400 civilians from a collapsed bunker and eliminated a Crethany patrol that strayed too close. Now They rested in a maintenance tunnel beneath what had once been a subway system. One of his youngest soldiers approached him in the darkness. "Sergeant Major, do you think we can really win this? They have ships in orbit, and we are hiding underground like animals." Choi looked at the young soldier and remembered his own daughter who had died in the bombardment. "When I was a child," Choi said, "my grandmother told me a story about our ancestors. Long ago, our people faced invasion by forces that seemed unstoppable. Our cities burned and our armies fell, but our people did not surrender. They hid in the mountains, and they waited and they fought back one small battle at a time until the invaders grew tired and left." He placed his hand on the young soldier's shoulder. "The Krethani think they have won because they hold the surface. But we hold something more valuable. We hold our hatred and our patience and our willingness to fight forever if necessary." The young soldier nodded and returned to rest. Choi looked up at the ceiling and thought about the billions of humans waiting in bunkers across the planet. Every one of them had lost someone they loved. Every one of them wanted justice. And every one of them was willing to wait as long as necessary to get a commander. Yun received Sergeant Major Choi's latest report and added it to the growing database of resistance operations across the planet. Similar reports arrived from thousands of resistance cells. The Krethani were losing soldiers every day. Their occupation was becoming unsustainable. It was almost time Yun opened a secure channel to Dr. Beak. "Doctor, begin final preparations for Prometheus activation. In 72 hours, we break radio silence." "Understood." "Commander, what message should we send?" Yun thought about Ambassador Seong, who had believed in diplomacy until his final breath. She thought about what he would want her to say. "Tell them this." Yun replied, "To the Krethani Dominion and the Galactic Accord, we received your message. Here is our reply. Deep beneath the ocean." Dr. Beak began powering up systems that had waited 50 years for this moment. The sleeping weapons stirred, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming.